Welcome to the True Man Podcast. This is an invitation, a radical reconstruction of a man's masculine heart and soul, and a place of safe community where we dare to ask questions deep seated inside a man and explore ways to help you become a better man, a better son, a better dad, and a better spouse. Well, thank you again for joining me today. Hey, it's the end of summer. We're just getting Labor Day is over with. I hope you had a great 3-day weekend. And here we are, man, sliding into the end of summer and heading into fall. So I hope things are going well with you. And I appreciate you listening today. Now, are you familiar with any of these things that people say? Maybe you've said them yourself. I just don't have enough money. I don't have enough time. I don't have enough experience. I'm not ready yet. I don't know where to begin. It's too hard. I'm just not that lucky. Nobody believes in me. I just don't know the right people. Well, today on the True Man podcast, it's we're going to talk about excuses if you haven't figured that out already. Now we've all made them, and sometimes we get used to making them and we internalize that as truth. And then they become self limiting beliefs. Now, it's easy to blame circumstances on other people or even fate when things don't go our way, right? We make excuses to avoid facing the truth, and often it's a way to protect ourselves from the discomfort of failure or the weight of responsibility. However, making excuses is a trap. It's a cycle that keeps us stagnant, preventing growth and progress. And true strength and growth come from owning both our successes and our failures. Now, taking responsibility for our actions and living authentically is critically important. Now, I'm the first to recognize that we don't live in a world where anybody, it feels like, wants to take responsibility, unless, of course, the outcome is exceptional. But what kind of life is that anyway? Really? Do you really want to go through life pretending when things go wrong, it's not your fault? How do you learn from that? How do you grow? Who can count on you when you act like that? You will never achieve your goals in life without taking the responsibility for victories and defeats. That's just the way it is. And in fact, I would dare say you'll learn more in defeat than you ever do from the victories. And what I've learned in my life is fail, fail often, fail quickly, get it out of the way, learn from it, and figure out how to move on. That's how you win in life. Now, we live in a culture where excuses have become commonplace, unfortunately. It seems worse now than ever. Whether it's blaming traffic for being late to work or citing a lack of time for not pursuing a passion or pointing fingers at a colleague when the project fails, excuses are everywhere. They are a way to deflect blame, to avoid admitting our own shortcomings, and to escape accountability. Now, consider the common excuses like this: I don't have enough time. How often do we hear this, or do we say it to ourselves? Now, the reality is we all have the same 24 hours in a day. So it's not that having enough time, but it's about how we prioritize and use the time we have. By saying, I don't have enough time, what we're really saying is that something else is more important to us, or that we're not disciplined enough to manage our time effectively. Now, another example of an excuse is, I'm just not good at that. This is said to do nothing other than shield against failure, for sure. If we don't try, we can't fail right. But in reality, this mindset keeps us from learning and growing. No one starts out being great at anything. Mastery of anything comes from practice and making mistakes and from persevering in the face of challenges. And by refusing to try, we rob ourselves of the opportunity to improve. Now, this podcast is the perfect example. I never sat in front of a microphone before. I didn't know if I could do it, but I didn't let that stop me. And here we are on episode 173. Now, what would have happened if I would have, fallen for, well, I just don't know if it'll work. I don't know if I can do that. I don't know if I'm good at that. Initially, probably wasn't very good at it, to be perfectly honest. But if you don't practice and you don't try, and in many cases, if you don't fail, you're never going to improve. So here we are, 173 podcasts in. I feel like I'm probably doing something right. So let's look at a few real life scenarios of excuses and their impact. How about career stagnation? Now, John is a mid level manager who's been in the same role for years. He watches as his colleagues get promoted, but he tells himself that they're just lucky or that they have the connections that he doesn't. Now, in reality, John has been coasting. He's avoiding taking on challenges, projects, and seeking out mentorship. His excuse is, I'm just not that type to self promote. And it's kept him from stepping out of his comfort zone and taking risks. And by failing to take responsibility for his own career growth, John remains stuck in the same position. Do you know that guy? Are you that guy? How about personal health? Sean struggles with his weight and overall health. He blames his genetics, his busy schedule, and the cost of healthy food. Yet he spends hours watching TV, surfing the internet, and regularly eats out at fast food restaurants. His excuse, I'm just too busy to eat healthy and exercise. Oh boy. Now, this masks the truth that he's not making health a priority. Now, by taking responsibility for his own choices and making small, consistent changes, Sean can transform his life. But as long as he clings to excuses, he's going to remain unhealthy and unhappy. Have you made these kinds of excuses for your health? I have. How about relationship issues? Now, Mark often finds himself in conflicts with his wife. He tells himself that he's too demanding and that he just can't meet her expectations. Excuse me, she's too demanding and that he can't meet her expectations. Probably better get that one right. His excuse? I'm just not good at communicating. Well, this allows him to avoid difficult conversations and self examination. However, by not taking responsibility for his role in the relationship, Mark contributes to ongoing tensions and dissatisfaction. And by learning to communicate better and taking ownership of his actions, Mark could improve his relationship. But his excuses keep him and his wife at odds. Are your relationships suffering because you avoid difficult conversations? And do you find it hard to look in the mirror and make those changes? Now, interestingly enough, you may think you're alone in your excuses, but let's have some fun here. Let's look back in time at the greatest book ever written, the Bible. Now, the Bible is full of stories where people made excuses to avoid responsibility and the consequences they faced as a result. Now, these stories serve as powerful reminders of the importance of taking responsibility and trusting in God's plan. Now, let's look at one of the greatest characters in the Bible, Moses. Now, when God called Moses to lead the Israelites out of Egypt, Moses initially made excuses. He said, "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh?" Later, he added, "I'm not eloquent. I am slow of speech and of tongue." Kind of funny. Probably considered one of the greatest speakers of all time, right? In the Bible. Moses was focused on his own limitations rather than trusting in God's power to work through him. Now, while God was patient with Moses, providing Aaron to speak on his behalf, Moses' reluctance nearly cost him the role of a lifetime. Now, this story shows that when we focus on our weaknesses and make excuses, we can miss out on the incredible things God has planned for us. Now, let's look at Jonah. Here's another character in the Bible. God commanded Jonah to go to Nineveh. and preach against its wickedness. But Jonah made the excuse that the task was too difficult and fled in the opposite direction. I bet you've never done that, have you? Now, his attempt to escape responsibility led him to be swallowed by a great fish. You remember the whale story, don't you? Now, only after repenting and fulfilling his mission did Jonah see the power of God's mercy. Now, Jonah's story illustrates that running from responsibility only delays the inevitable and often leads to greater challenges. It's better to face our fears and trust in God's guidance. Understand, everything comes to light. Now, finally, let's look at Adam and Eve. Boy, there we go. Love talking about these characters. So much to learn here. In the Garden of Eden, after Adam and Eve ate the forbidden fruit, they both made excuses to avoid taking responsibility, didn't they? Adam blamed Eve, saying, "The woman who you gave to me, well, she gave me the fruit of the tree, and I ate." And Eve, in turn, blamed the serpent, saying, "The serpent deceived me, and I ate." Well, of course, their failure to take responsibility for their actions led to the expulsion from Eden and introduced to the world to sin, the world that we live in. Now, this story highlights the destructive nature of consequences by making excuses instead of owning up to our mistakes. Now, maybe you're wondering, how do I break free from this cycle of excuse that requires a deliberate, and I mean deliberate, change in mindset? And that's exactly what this is. This is a mindset issue. And if you're going to break free from excuses, you got to change the way you think. The first thing you need to do is acknowledge your excuses. The first step in changing your mindset is to become aware of the excuses you make. You need to pay attention to the things you say to yourself and others when faced with challenges. Write these things down, journal them, and ask yourself whether they're truly valid, or just a way to avoid discomfort. You need to change how you say things, how you see things. You know, cancel. That's a great way. When you hear something negative come into your head, cancel. Get it out of your head and change it to a positive. In fact, two, shift that mindset. Your perspective, shift your perspective. Instead of seeing challenges as obstacles, view them as an opportunity for growth. Now, when you catch yourself making excuses, reframe it. For example, instead of saying, "I'm not good at this," say, "I'm going to learn and improve." This simple shift in language can change your entire approach to challenges. Now, three, a lot of people don't want to hear this. You are going to have to take ownership, but there are huge benefits to doing this. When you start taking responsibility for both your successes and failures in your life, when something goes wrong, resist the urge to blame others or external circumstances. Instead, ask yourself what you could have done differently and how you can improve in the future. When you start taking ownership of your life, your mistakes, your successes, your life will change. Set clear goals. I tell you this all the time. It's so important. Often we make excuses because we lack direction. Now, by setting clear, achievable goals, you create a roadmap for success. Break down your goals into smaller, manageable tasks and hold yourself accountable for completing them. And finally, surround yourself with accountability. Boy, oh boy. Yes. Find people who will hold you accountable and challenge you to do better. This could be a mentor, a friend, a group of like minded individuals. Now, when you're surrounded by people who push you to be your best, it's harder to make excuses. You want to get around people who can help you better your best. You want to get around givers and get away from the takers. This is going to help you live your best life. So who can we look to as a model? Well, Jesus, of course, the ultimate true man, the original true man. Jesus is the ultimate example of living a life without excuses, isn't he? He faced incredible challenges, from the temptation in the wilderness to the agony of the cross, yet he never shirked his responsibility. He embraces his mission with authenticity, humility, and an unwavering commitment to God's will. You can do the same. Now, to live a life that exemplifies that authenticity and realness like Jesus, what do we need to do? Embrace our purpose. Embrace our purpose. And if you don't know what your purpose is, start thinking about it. Jesus knew his purpose and pursued it with determination. We too must seek out and embrace our God given purpose, committing ourselves fully to the path that God has set before us. How about practice humility, right? Nobody likes all these people whose head won't even fit through the door. Jesus, he didn't seek glory for himself, but serve others selflessly. He was a giver. Taking on responsibilities requires humility and the willingness to admit that when you're wrong, and the courage to make amends for it. Trust in God's plan. He has one for you. Do you trust in it? You know, Jesus trusted God's plan even when it led to the cross. Now, we must learn to trust that God is in control. I know it's difficult. I pray about this daily. Even when things don't go as we expect, we have to trust. When we stop making excuses and we trust in God's plan, we open ourselves to the possibility of his greater purpose and being fulfilled in our lives. Lead by example. Boy, is there a greater leader of example? Jesus led by example, showing love, grace, and forgiveness to all those around him. And we too should strive to be positive influence, leading others by our actions and taking responsibility for the impact that we have on the world. And we need to commit to growth. Jesus was constantly teaching, growing, and preparing his disciples for their future roles. And we should commit to a lifelong of learning and growth, always striving to be a better version of ourselves. So, in conclusion today, taking responsibility for our lives is not just about eliminating excuses, it's about embracing the power that we have to shape our destinies. Now, by owning our choices, learning from our mistakes, and committing to growth, we can live a life of authenticity and integrity. The examples of the Bible's characters who made excuses remind us of the importance of trust, humility, and responsibility. And in the end, living like Jesus means embracing our purpose, taking responsibility for our actions, and trusting God's plan. And it's a challenging path for sure, but it's also the path to true fulfillment and a life well lived. So let's stop making excuses and start taking responsibility. After all, our future, your future, depends on it. Now, excuses are fleeting, short things you put in your head that will never allow you to get ahead. If you suffer from this fatal flaw and want an antidote, simply reach out to me at mike@truemanlifecoaching.com and let's talk. It's a free initial call, and I'd enjoy the opportunity to meet you. Now, I enjoyed having you in the passenger seat today. If you enjoyed today's podcast, please get out there and leave me a great review. It helps elevate the podcast, and I always appreciate hearing from you. Now, until next week, go out and make this your very best day ever.